Tonight is my cousin's engagement party, and I already know how it's going to go. My aunt will make a point of seating me at the far end of the table, near the kitchen, where the noise from the catering staff covers most of the conversation. My older brother will ask, with that particular smile he has, how the little app thing is coming along. My mother will touch my arm and say, quietly, that I really should have worn something nicer. And somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, someone will say something about the Section 8 apartment. They always do. I pulled into the driveway of my aunt's house in Scottsdale just after 6. The desert air still held the day's heat, and I sat in my car for a moment with the engine off, watching the lights through the windows, the shadows of people moving around inside. I could see my brother through the glass, already holding a drink, already laughing at something. I took a breath. Then I went in. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who spent 30 years making sure everyone knew she had good taste. Travertine floors, a kitchen that had been featured in a local magazine, flowers that cost more than my first month's rent in the apartment they never let me forget about. "You made it," my aunt said when she saw me, and the way she said it managed to suggest both surprise and mild disappointment. I hugged her. I told her the house looked beautiful. It did. My cousin was glowing the way people glow when they're genuinely happy, and I was glad for her. She hugged me tight and introduced me to her fiancé, a quiet man named Patrick who had kind eyes and seemed slightly overwhelmed by the whole production. I liked him immediately. Then my brother appeared. He was 3 years older than me and had always moved through rooms like he owned them, which was a quality our father had admired and our mother had encouraged. He worked in commercial real estate in Phoenix and made a lot of money doing it and wanted everyone to know both things at all times. "There she is," he said, spreading his arms, "the entrepreneur." He said the word the way some people say vegetarian, technically neutral, but with just enough emphasis to let you know he found it mildly ridiculous. I let him hug me. "Good to see you," I said. "How's the startup life? You still doing the—" He waved his hand vaguely. "The app thing?" "Still doing it," I said. "Good, good." He nodded slowly. The way you nod when someone tells you they're taking an improv class. "That's great. You need anything?" "I know things have been," another vague gesture, "tight." "I'm good," I said. "Thanks." He patted my shoulder and moved on. I found a glass of sparkling water and stood near the window that looked out over the backyard pool. The sun was almost down, and the water was turning colors I didn't have names for. I thought about my grandmother, who had taught me to swim in a pool very much like that one, who had told me once that the women in our family were built for things nobody expected of them. She'd been dead for 11 years. I missed her especially in rooms like this one. "You look thin," my mother said, appearing beside me. "Hi, Mom. Are you eating?" She studied my face with the focused concern of someone who had converted worry into a form of intimacy years ago and never looked back. "Yes, Mom, I'm eating." "You should have worn the blue dress. I told you. I was wearing a perfectly nice black blazer and slacks." "I know you did." She sighed, not unkindly, just habitually, and squeezed my hand. "It's good you came. It means a lot to your cousin." I should tell you something about where I was at that point in my life, because context matters. I was 31. I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe that I shared with a roommate I'd found on Craigslist 18 months earlier and who had since become one of my closest friends. I drove a 2016 Honda Civic with a crack in the rear bumper that I kept meaning to get fixed. I had approximately $4,000 in my checking account and a company that, on paper, was worth nothing and, in reality, was the thing I thought about every waking moment. The company was called Fieldline. We built logistics software for small agricultural operations, the kind of family farms and regional distributors that were too big to run on spreadsheets and too small to afford the enterprise systems designed for massive agribusinesses. We helped them track inventory, manage seasonal labor, coordinate deliveries. Unglamorous work, invisible work, the kind of work that nobody at an engagement party in Scottsdale was ever going to ask about with genuine interest. I had started it 3 years earlier with my college roommate, a woman named Zoe who understood supply chain logistics better than anyone I'd ever met. after we both watched her family's farm in Central California lose $200,000 in one season because their tracking systems failed during harvest. We'd taken out personal loans. We'd worked out of Zoe's living room for 8 months. We'd eaten a lot of rice and beans and had a lot of 11 p.m. calls that started with, "Okay, but what if we just..." There had been a period, about 18 months in, when I genuinely did not know if I was going to be able to make rent. I had applied for rental assistance through a county program. I had received it. 2 months. It had kept me from having to move back home, which would have meant moving back into a dynamic that would have slowly, quietly taken something from me that I didn't have a name for but knew was important. My family knew about the rental assistance. My brother had found out. I still didn't know exactly how, and he had told our mother, and our mother had told our aunt, and it had made its way around the family the way certain pieces of information do in families, not announced, just present, available to be referenced when useful. Dinner was served at 8. I found my place card near the kitchen, as expected. The table was long and white and beautifully set, and for a while, things were actually fine. My cousin's future in-laws were lovely people from Tucson who asked good questions and laughed easily. My uncle told a story about a fishing trip that went longer than it needed to, but was genuinely funny. Patrick kept looking at my cousin with an expression that made me feel hopeful about marriage as an institution, which is not a feeling I had often. Then the conversation turned, the way it does at these things, and I'm not sure I can tell you exactly how we got there, but we got there. It started with my brother talking about a development project he was working on in Chandler, something about mixed-use zoning and the timeline being more complicated than expected. My aunt made a comment about how hard it was to find good contractors. Someone mentioned the economy, someone mentioned the economy, someone mentioned housing costs. And then my brother looked down the table at me and he said, "What about you? You still on the county assistance program?" The table didn't go quiet. It sort of shifted, the way air shifts before weather. I looked at him. He was smiling, but it was the particular smile of someone who believed they were being playful and had never seriously considered that they might not be. "I'm not," I said. "Oh, good." He nodded in this performative way, like he was relieved. "Because I was a little worried about you there for a while. Rental assistance." He shook his head slightly. "That's rough. Mom said you were really struggling." My mother, to her credit, looked uncomfortable. She looked at her plate. "It was a hard season," I said. "I worked through it." Sure. He picked up his wine glass. Look, I've always said if you need something, just ask. You don't have to apply to government programs. Your family." The thing about my brother is that he was not a cruel man. He genuinely believed, I think, that what he had just said was generous, that he was offering something. He had absolutely no awareness of what he had actually done, which was to take a moment that was hard and private and mine and put it in the center of a dinner table so that he could perform generosity over the top of it. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it, and I also meant nothing by it. My aunt made a small sound of agreement. My cousin looked at me with an expression I recognized: apology, helplessness, the look of someone who loves you and also cannot fix their own family. I gave her a small smile. I picked up my fork. But then my aunt said, and I don't know why she said it, maybe because silence had started to feel like the wrong direction, "It's just hard to understand, honey, why you put yourself through all that. The struggling. Why not just, there are so many good companies hiring. You could have a real salary, benefits, a 401k. "I have a 401k, I said. "You know what I mean." "I think so," I said. "But I like what I'm building." "What are you building, though?" my brother said. It wasn't mean exactly. It was genuinely curious, maybe, or genuinely dismissive. Sometimes those things look the same. "Software," I said, "for agricultural operations." "Farm software," he said, "essentially." "Is there," he paused, working something out, "is there money in that?" "There can be," I said. He laughed, not unkindly, just easily, and said, "Well, let us know when you figure out which one it is." I didn't say what I could have said. I thought about it. There was a version of that evening where I put my fork down and told them everything, the Series A that had closed 6 weeks earlier, the contracts we'd signed with 3 regional distributors in the Central Valley, the profile that had run in AgTech Quarterly that someone had sent me with the subject line, "Is this you?" The conversation we'd had with a private equity firm in San Francisco that I still wasn't sure I wanted to pursue. I thought about that version. I considered it. I picked up my fork instead. There's something I've noticed about the instinct to prove yourself to people who have already decided what you are. It doesn't work the way you hope. You think you're going to show them something that changes the picture, but what actually happens is that you've spent energy trying to move something that doesn't want to move, and you've let them see that their opinion of you has weight. Sometimes the most powerful thing is to let people keep their picture while you go home and keep building. That's what I told myself anyway. Driving back to Tempe that night with the windows down and the desert dark on either side of the highway. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October, about 3 weeks later. I was at my desk at 7:15, which was not unusual. Zoe and I had early calls with a distributor in Fresno on Tuesdays, and my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. San Francisco area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Is this the founder of Fieldline?" a woman asked when I picked up. "One of them," I said. "I'm calling from the editorial team at Forbes," she said. "We're doing a piece on emerging agtech companies and we'd like to talk to you." I was quiet for a moment. Outside my window, my neighbor's sprinkler system was running, which it did every Tuesday at exactly this time, despite the fact that it had rained the night before. "Okay," I said. "Yes, I'd like that too." The piece ran on a Thursday. I didn't tell anyone in my family it was coming. There was no particular strategic reason for that, or maybe there was. I'm honestly still not sure. Part of it was that I didn't want to jinx anything. Part of it was that I had spent 3 years building something in a space my family couldn't see, and I had gotten used to that invisibility, and some corner of me wanted to stay there a little longer. The magazine sent me 2 copies of the print edition. I kept them both. The title of the piece was "Solving the Problem Nobody in Silicon Valley Bothered to Look At," which I thought was a little grandiose but not entirely wrong. There was a photograph of me and Zoe in front of a walnut orchard in Tulare County, squinting in the October light, looking, I thought, like ourselves. Like 2 people who had been doing real work and were slightly surprised anyone had noticed. My phone started buzzing around 9 that morning and did not stop for most of the day. Old classmates, former professors, people I hadn't heard from in years. LinkedIn notifications that became meaningless after the first 50. My mother called at 11:15. "I saw the article," she said. There was a pause. "Why didn't you tell us?" "I wanted to wait until it was real," I said. Another pause. "You look tired in the photo." "Mom, you look good," she said quickly. "I'm proud of you." She said it a little stiffly, the way people say things they mean but haven't practiced saying. "I didn't know you were doing so well." "I know," I said. "Your brother," she started, then stopped. "It's fine, Mom. He feels bad." I looked out the window. The sprinkler system was off now. "He doesn't have to feel bad," I said. "I didn't do any of this to make anyone feel bad." And that was true. I want to be clear about that. Not because I'm a particularly gracious person. I'm not, always. But because at some point in the last 3 years, something had shifted, and I had stopped needing the people in that dining room in Scottsdale to understand what I was doing. I had stopped performing for that audience. When you stop needing their approval, you also stop needing their failure to approve. It just becomes weather. Something that happens. Something you drive home through with the windows down. My brother texted me that afternoon. It said, "Saw the Forbes thing." That's huge. Really. I'm sorry if I've been an ass. Proud of you. I sat with that for a while. The thing about my brother is, and I've thought about this a lot, he grew up in the same family I did, with the same parents, in the same house, and somehow we learned completely different things from it. He learned that safety came from visible success, from titles and salaries and things you could name at a dinner table. I think I learned, slowly, the hard way, That safety came from building something that was yours, even when no one could see it, even when you needed 2 months of rental assistance to keep going, even when someone asked in front of the whole family if you were still on the county program. I texted him back, "Thank you. Really, let's have coffee soon." I meant it. 2 months after the piece ran, we closed our Series B. I won't tell you the number. I've found that numbers become the story if you let them. And I don't want this to be a story about numbers. I'll say that it was enough to hire 12 people and open a second office and stop worrying, for the first time in 3 years, about making payroll. Zoe and I sat in our conference room the evening after it closed, a conference room we had rented for 4 months before we could afford to sign the lease on the actual office, and we ordered pizza and didn't say much for a while. The city was doing its thing outside the window, indifferent and constant. "Do you feel different?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said. "Do you?" "Not really," she said. "I feel like we have to hire a lot of people now." "Yeah," I said. We ate our pizza. There was work tomorrow. There was always work tomorrow, which, I had learned, was the thing about doing something you actually chose. The work doesn't become a burden just because it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, and it's still the thing you would choose again. My cousin got married in April in Sedona, in the Red Rocks, with the kind of light that makes everyone look like they're in a painting. I stood in the back and watched her walk toward Patrick and thought about my grandmother saying we were built for things nobody expected of us. My aunt hugged me at the reception and said, "I always knew you had it in you." She said it warmly, genuinely, with the complete absence of awareness that she had not, in fact, always seemed to know this. I hugged her back. I told her the flowers were beautiful. My brother bought me a glass of champagne and we stood together at the edge of the dance floor and watched our cousin dance with her new husband, and he said, "She looks really happy." "She does," I said. "You look happy too," he said. "Happier than you used to." I thought about that for a moment. The desert stars were starting to show above the venue's open roof. The band was playing something I recognized but couldn't name. "I think I am," I said. And I meant it. Not as a performance, not as a point scored, not as an answer to a question that had been asked at a dinner table in Scottsdale. Just as a fact. A quiet, private, ordinary fact that didn't need anyone else in the room to make it true. We clinked glasses. We watched our cousin dance. The stars got brighter as the evening deepened, the way they do in the desert when you finally let your eyes adjust. I've thought a lot about that dinner table in Scottsdale. The travertine floors, the expensive flowers, my brother's smile when he said county assistance like it was a punchline he'd been saving. What I keep coming back to is this. He wasn't wrong about the facts. I had applied for rental assistance. I had needed it. 2 months. And for a long time I carried that like it was evidence of something, proof that maybe the people who doubted me had a point, then maybe I had miscalculated something fundamental about my own capabilities. It took me a while to understand that the shame wasn't mine. It had been handed to me and I had accepted it without really examining whether it fit. The truth is that every hard thing I went through during those 3 years, the lean months, the rice and beans, the 11 p.m. calls with Zoe when we weren't sure if we were going to make it, every single one of those things was information. It was data about what I could handle, about what the work actually required, about who I was when nobody was watching and there was nothing to perform. You don't learn that in a comfortable year. You learn it in the years that ask something real of you. My brother learned something different from growing up in the same house I did. He learned that safety looks like a title, a salary, a thing you can name at a table. I don't fault him for that. I understand it. But I also know that the version of safety he was describing, the kind that depends on other people being able to see it and confirm it, is a version that has a ceiling. You can only go as high as the room you're standing in allows. What Zoe and I built in that living room in Tempe, with our personal loans and our Craigslist roommates and our county assistants and our absolute refusal to stop, that didn't have a ceiling because it wasn't built for an audience. It was built because we saw a real problem and we were stubborn enough to stay in the room with it until we figured something out. That's the thing I want to say clearly because I think it gets lost in stories like mine. The hard part was never the money. The hard part was continuing to believe in something that nobody around me could see yet. That takes a specific kind of discipline. Not the loud kind, not the kind you post about, but the quiet, daily kind where you just keep showing up to the work even when the work isn't rewarding you yet. Even when the people at the dinner table are asking if you've considered a real salary. Intelligence matters, but intelligence without the willingness to be wrong, to be uncomfortable, to be misunderstood for years, it doesn't get you very far. What got Fieldline to where it is wasn't brilliance. It was Zoe and I deciding over and over again, on the ordinary Tuesday mornings when nothing felt exciting, that we were going to keep going anyway. I think about my grandmother sometimes, how she told me we were built for things nobody expected of us. I think she meant exactly that. Not that we were destined for anything, but that we had the constitution to keep building even when the expectation wasn't there. That's not fate. That's a choice you make, quietly, every day, until one Tuesday morning a San Francisco number calls and the sprinkler system is running next door and everything is exactly the same as it was the day before, except that something has shifted, permanently, in the direction of the thing you chose. The stars above that wedding venue in Sedona were the same stars that were over Tempe on the hard nights. I just finally had the eyes for them.